SuperTalk Mississippi media production.
Men, find relief from BPH with a new aquablation therapy from Baptist Memorial Hospital, North Mississippi. Embrace life again with the only real-time water jet treatment for men with BPH. Call 662-234-1448 and get better with Baptist.
This is Gerard Gibert, and thank you for listening to MidDays here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
MidDays with Gerard Gibert is on the air. MidDays with Gerard Gibert is powered by C-Spire. Power your home or business with C-Spire Fiber. To learn more, visit supertalk.fm/C-Spire. C-Spire Fiber powers SuperTalk Mississippi. Get ready to go beyond the headlines and join a meaningful conversation with people from around the state. Hello. You're listening to MidDays with Gerard Gibert here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Everyone, and welcome to MidDays, SuperTalk Mississippi. I'm your host, Gerard Gibert, along with Rhino in the Element Wealth Studio, guiding you through the middle of your day with facts, fodder, and fine music. Morning there, Rhino.
Howdy.
All righty, we got the winds kicking up out there. We're set for a round of some severe weather. Potentially moving into the Magnolia State this afternoon. Looking at the latest maps, looks like it enters the western sections of the state in not too long from this point right now, right? Another hour or so, starts moving in across the river. And then this afternoon, the central part of the state. And looking at the time frames in the regions as drawn on the maps, fairly vertical. You know, it's moving more, is the front and the severe weather almost directly west to east, paralleling our coast, if you will. So we're going to have to keep an eye on that. Please stay weather aware. You just knew when you had a little warm air, a little cold air, and you got fronts moving through, that the prospect of severe weather is in play for sure.
Mainly what I'm seeing from the people that are much smarter than I am when it comes to the weather, they're saying it's really the wind that's going to be a big factor.
Yeah, strong wind.
There is the potential for tornadic activity, but one of the storm chasers I was watching was mentioning there's also some spots of clearing that are popping up in this storm system. So
okay.
It may... it won't fizzle. It's already gone too far to fizzle out, but it may not be as strong. So fingers crossed that it weakens.
Yeah, okay. I could buy that. And then tomorrow, sunny but strong winds again, right? That's what we're looking for. Well, the old tariffs are in effect. Mr. Trump finds it appropriate to levy really significant tariffs on China and Mexico. I just heard an interview on the way. I'm not sure if you caught it, Rhino, with Vice President J.D. Vance, and he indicates that, at least in this particular interview and the questioning from reporters, and I just stopped there. Isn't it refreshing at a minimum to see the president in the United States actually stop and take questions from reporters and respond so that the American people know where they stand? Just that is such a radical departure of what we had in the prior 4 years. And it's something that you don't normally think about, like, well, of course they're going to stop and talk to the press. Until the last guy, it's like, no, we don't do that anymore. So bravo to the president, the vice president, for engaging the press and telling the American people where they stand. But where I'm going is, he said, we've got to control this flow of fentanyl across the borders. And it seems like that's the bigger issue in play as the justification for the tariffs. Now, the president has indicated other inequities, if you will, in the way those other countries handle the import and apply tariffs on the import of American goods. And he's trying to level that playing field, and I applaud him for that. But the reality is, these tariffs, as he said, he told us, look, this is going to cause pain. The question is it short-term pain or is it long-term pain? Will we get some reaction that long-term benefits Americans? Because right now, Justin Trudeau, why is he still around? I thought the guy was out of there. What's up with that?
He basically, in a roundabout way, said he's not going to seek any further office, but until they hold an election for his replacement, he's still there.
Okay. Whatever. I can't keep up with it, honestly. But it appears that Canada, at least at this point, with Justin Trudeau still at the top there, they imposed some retaliatory tariffs. And I'll tell you why I'm concerned about that. They are a considerable importer of American food products, agricultural products. And that's a concern because that affects the great state of Mississippi. You remember not too long ago, Rhino, we had Mike McCormick, president of the Mississippi Farm Bureau Federation, on the program, and he was talking about how that might affect Mississippi's farmers because much of what they produce is imported by Canada. So this could have certainly an impact on the American farmers, and that, of course, would flow in throughout the state of Mississippi, given that our economy is so largely dependent on agriculture. So that's an issue that we just got to keep an eye on, for sure. But Canada says that they're going to put tariffs on us. We're putting tariffs on them. I'd say we got ourselves a good old-fashioned tariff war going on right here in North America. I think that's the way to look at it, because last night at midnight, the tariffs on Canada and Mexico took effect with additional duties on China, by the way, an additional 10% tariff on China. And so that was announced, and the markets are reacting very negatively. Yesterday, a precipitous decline of around 700 points on the Dow. Last I checked, Rhino, it's down 400 or 500 this morning. The NASDAQ also in negative territory. Now, a 1,000-point drop in a couple of days is significant. I saw somebody on social media say this is fear-mongering. It's only 1.5%. It's down, by the way, 687 at present. 1.5%, guys, in one day is a lot. So think about it. If it continues on that trend, it would only take about 70 days, 65 to 70 days before it's zero. Now, I'm not saying that's going to happen, but 1.5% in terms of movements in the Dow Jones average is significant either way. You don't believe me? Check out your 401k plan. When it goes up 1.5% and goes down, I'll tell you that for my personally managed account, yesterday was the worst day in history. Worst day since I've had since 2014 in my personally managed account. Now, I'm up significantly, obviously, since then, so I'm still way ahead. It's a long-term play. I'm not a day trader. I just noticed that when the markets closed yesterday. I, of course, checked my account and noticed how much it was down. Now, I admit, much of my personally managed account is in more high-risk growth technology stocks. My professionally managed accounts are not. That's my instructions to Element Wealth, for example, who handles some of my assets. But the 1.5% drop is significant. Now, today it's down right now 1.58%. So that's 3% in a day. That's a lot. And it's the uncertainty. We don't really know what the deal is with these tariffs. I saw an interview this morning on the Business Channel with a dealer somewhere, I think in Michigan, perhaps, somewhere up in the upper Midwest. This was an automobile dealer that sells, I guess we don't call them Dodge Ram trucks anymore. They're just Ram trucks, is what he said. That it's without the...
Yeah, Ram's its own brand, kind of.
Okay. And he was showing a vehicle on his lot, for example, that is out the door at $80,000, sticker price. He said now it's $100 today. Went from $80 to $100 today. He said he has 2 ordered for customers that canceled. He said he can't cancel them with a factory. I guess it was a situation where the customer retains the prerogative to cancel the order if they decide they're not. I mean, normally when you do that, the dealers think, okay, if I buy this thing and they end up not closing on it, I'll just put it on the lot and sell it later, right? I mean, it's no big deal. And he said he honestly thinks he'll probably never sell that vehicle and have to auction it off at those 2 vehicles at a loss. So I'm all for bringing manufacturing back into the country. I mean, that's what that stems from, because apparently this model vehicle is made in Canada. The problem is, as Mr. Trump rightfully points out, the European nations make it very difficult for us to export our vehicles to them. Yet we readily import their vehicles here. The question really is, and remains to be seen, are tariffs the proper approach to level out that playing field and eliminate that disparity? The president believes they are, but he says it's going to be painful. Gordon Fellows at 11:05, Dr. Katherine Pannel at 11:35.
Rogers Day.
This segment of Middays with Gerard Gibert is brought to you by Covington County Hospital in Collins, where your health matters.
We're rolling. Middays with Gerard Gibert.
What? This is so
awesome. On SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Thanks for the Mardi Gras music there, Rhino. So you probably saw that because of the bad weather, the city of New Orleans have worked collaboratively, all the various crews, law enforcement. The schedule has changed, so it may be over. They moved up the traditional Rex and Zulu parades. Got to have that. I mean, that's quintessential, the king of all kings, Mardi Gras, right?
Got to hand out the coconuts.
Yeah, the golden coconuts. And, of course, in general, Rex always thought to be the most prestigious. Zulu, as you know, is rooted in African-American culture. But those two are, I believe, are back-to-back, if I'm not mistaken. And then after that, it's usually Elks, and I can't remember the other one, which are not floats, but they're trucks that are decorated up, that are families. They're a more family-oriented club, whereas Rex, that's the blue bloods, right?
Well, in fairness, most of the wild parades were this weekend.
That's right. The weekend has kind of evolved into that.
Like Endymion and Orpheus, and even Tux can get wild depending on where you are on the route, because it is a potty humor-themed parade.
Well, Endymion, of course, that's the all-female crew, I believe. And, and the costumes are extravagant. And they're really something to behold.
My experience with it was being about 50 people deep at the bend on St. Charles and Canal there.
Exactly right. Well, you're at the prime spot, St. Charles and Canal.
Well, it's prime for the parade. It's not prime for really anything else that humanity enjoys, like breathing, comfort.
Very true. So, okay, so it looks like some of the parades perhaps have been canceled as well. I guess maybe this afternoon. Interesting. I think I got that right about Endymion. I'm looking at the kind of the history of that. I could be wrong. I used to go every year. My My parents being from New Orleans. Maybe not. There's one, I can't remember which one it is. It's like all female and it's super extravagant. And it's the weekend. See if somebody knows it. Nope, hadn't seen anything on the text line yet. But nonetheless, they moved everything up this weekend, or today, I should say. And
according to the Google Box, the all-female crews include the crew of Muses, the crew of Iris, the crew of Cleopatra, the crew of Nandi, the crew of Mystic Crew of Femme Fatale, and the crew of Artemis.
Okay, so maybe it's Iris that I'm thinking about. That
Iris does sound familiar.
Yeah, that rolls on the weekend, maybe.
Yeah, Iris is the oldest and largest all-female crew in New Orleans.
Okay, so I believe that's the one that's just, the costumes are just incredible. I mean, that's what they're known for, essentially. Is all the female socialites on the floats, all adorned in extravagant attire, to say the least. But you're right. I think the weekend is turned, prior to Mardi Gras Day, has turned out to be really the biggest celebration. And
yeah, I mean, I've been to Mardi Gras several times, and not being a local, it feels weird to be there on Tuesday.
Yeah.
Like, they're welcoming, of course, because it's Carnival, it's Mardi Gras.
Yeah.
It's party. But most of the out-of-towners party on the weekend, and if you're still there partying Monday and then on Fat Tuesday, you're a hardcore partier or a local.
Yeah, that's right.
If you don't fit in one of those two, you're just kind of sitting around going, well.
Well, when I was a kid, my parents, of course, both being New Orleanians, and it was our custom that my whole extended family, cousins, aunts, and uncles, we all dress in costume. That was very common. I don't know that it is anymore, but you could certainly notice us because we all had the same costumes. And my mother used to sew them. And what I remember that she really liked to focus on were, I think I'm saying this right, period clowns, periods, and they have a certain sort of clown outfit. It's kind of a sophisticated clown, if you will.
Yeah, it's the old-timey French clown look.
Okay. Given it's New Orleans, it's Mardi Gras with the French connection there, no pun intended. And my mother would literally sew them for the whole family, like 20 or so of us. You know, from me being 8, 10 years old with the big pointed hats, I don't know what you call those exactly, and the big ruffled lace buttons, if you will. Kind of cool. But man, we would park, where as close as we could get, and then walk to the parade routes. We like to hang out around Lee Circle. I guess we can't call it Lee Circle anymore, right? Because they took down the statue of Robert E. Lee. How dumb was that? And that was always fun. But, I mean, from the morning until 6 o'clock at night. And if you had to go to the restroom, you had to try to bum your way into one of the shops or bars or something that was close by that was open and let you in. Man, all-day deal, just absolutely worn out. Bags full of beads and doubloons and trinkets and so forth. Because I think like the Elks, there's another one that comes right after that that's a truck parade, as we used to call it, with the families. It'd be like over 100. It's like one after another. Keep going on. Because Rex is like, 25, 30. But the float, they're bona fide extravagant floats. I mean, they're gorgeous. And then Zulu, of course, which is so entertaining, so great. And then behind that, the Elks, and there's one more, I can't remember. But that huge deal. So the markets, again, not responding positively to the tariffs. Fear gauge, that's the VIX, is extending its rally, meaning it's headed downward. The VIX, it closed at its highest level of the year yesterday. Gold prices rose. That's another sign of investor caution. Agricultural commodities, again, targeted by China's retaliatory tariffs. They fell. Cotton, corn, soybeans, and wheat traded lower. That's not good news for struggling farmers in this country. So it's the price we're paying to try to level the playing field. Now, I believe Mr. Trump tonight, he's going to go to the Hill there to deliver an address to a joint gathering of Congress. He says in all caps on his social media account, "I will tell it like it is." And he's going to go through his accomplishments. I would say the main one at this main group of accomplishments are shutting down the border. I mean, nothing short of miraculous there. But I say again, all it took was the messaging coming out of the White House. You ain't coming across the border anymore. And so at that point, that the cartels and all the people thinking about crossing over said, yeah, the game has changed. New sheriff in town, as the saying goes. And I think they started to hold back crossing the border, just changing that simple attitude towards it. Because the prior administration was, come on in. They would tell you, oh, no, the border's totally secure. And then you look up and 10,000 come across in one day. All documented. All captured on video. And Joe Biden would just stand up clueless and lie about it, along with his surrogate liar, Karine Jean-Pierre.
I mean, who can forget the video of him wandering on the White House lawn and the reporter shouts out, "Mr. President, can you do anything else about the border?" He just holds his hands up. "I've done everything I can about the border," and just continues wandering across the lawn.
Wrong, because in a short
Obviously
month,
not.
We have a new president, a new approach, focus, policy, all the above, messaging, and that situation changed dramatically. So he's going to tout that, no doubt, and he should, because I think the polls show even the Democrats lean into that policy. Yeah, they're tired of seeing this flow of illegals across the border. He'll talk about Elon Musk's efforts to shrink government, and he'll share with us lots of data, I think, related to that.
And the Democrats are going to show their rear in public.
No doubt about it. There'll be more discussion of his immigration crackdown. I think we'll get that. He'll talk a little bit about tariffs and high costs, but my guess is, Rhino, he's going to be a bit reticent at this point with respect to the economy. Because, honestly, we're going through a period where we're trying to flush out the poor economy transferred to him by Joe Biden. Democrats will disagree. We're coming right back in the Element Wealth studio.
From the Seabrook.
Attention, adoring fans!
It's time for Middays with Gerard Gibert on SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. We are in the Element Wealth studio. Are you thinking about or planning for retirement? Do you have a plan? Go to myelementwealth.com or call 601-957-6006 to let Element Wealth help you find your balance between income, growth, and guarantees. Well, watching the markets, quick check there. Still down rather sharply in today's trading. Just lots of volatility, lots of concern. Now, honestly...
So what you're saying is if Tuesday is the day you normally check your 401k...
don't do it.
You might want to reschedule that for a different day.
On the other hand, my young friend, this could be a tremendous buying opportunity.
That's very true. The funny money is as low as it's been for a while.
Yeah. Boy, did the wind ever get taken out of its sail in a hurry.
Because it had jumped up over the weekend with Trump releasing the news of, it's going to be Bitcoin and Ethereum and all these other ones in the cryptocurrency strategic reserve.
It's still incredibly volatile, and it will remain so for quite some time. no disrespect to my friends that believe that, it's just nothing but
diamond hands to the moon.
Right, skyward trajectory. And I completely believe there's a place for cryptocurrency in the global economy. There are many, many, many benefits of it. I would also submit that the underlying technology that powers it, blockchain, has tremendously more application and value proposition than the cryptocurrency that lives on top of it specifically. You know what I'm saying on that?
Yeah.
So that we hadn't even begun to scratch the surface of what blockchain can do. I also heard a report this morning. Am I getting this right? That Waze, because I kind of call it what I was dressing. Waze, the app Waze, is now offering autonomous transportation services, autonomous vehicle transportation services. I heard the reporter, the journalist, the business journalist, and said that, I think in San Francisco is where they're piloting this project, said that, she used her Waze app, called up a ride, got on, got out, totally uneventful, no driver. Right? Is that what happened?
I haven't seen that story, but it wouldn't surprise me because self-driving vehicles in Southern California have been a thing for a decade and a half now.
Yeah, that's true. Well, Elon Musk will tell you, he's betting the dang future of his companies on that. By the way, Tesla ain't doing too well right now. And I think it's a matter of time before, Rhino, the board and the investors have a chat with Mr. Musk and maybe suggest that he's spending a little bit too much time and having too much fun in his role with Doge, and he needs to focus on what they invested in, which is his talent and his leadership to drive value and growth in those companies, because right now that's a problem. And let's be honest, if the Congress, which I fully support, if they repeal a lot of those crazy electric vehicle subsidies available to consumers in the Inflation Reduction Act, that will have a negative impact on his company. But I think the biggest thing is that overseas sales are hurting, particularly in China, because they've introduced lots of competitive EVs that have sort of diminished the novelty of Tesla. Could be an issue. Something else that we need to take a look at, just talking about the possibility of having to endure a little pain to kind of rid ourselves of this stubborn inflation, high interest rates, all the above. The Atlanta Fed GDP Now model estimates that we're going to experience negative GDP growth this particular quarter. So we're approaching a point where we've got 3 plus weeks remaining in the quarter. And this is crazy because a month ago their model showed this first quarter tracking close to a positive 4%, which is mind-boggling GDP growth, honestly. We'd love to have 3. We'd be booming at 3. Over the last 8 years, we've kind of stayed in that 1.5 to 2 range. But a negative 2.8, a contraction. So then the question is, what will the Fed do with respect to interest rates? Because typically the reaction to negative GDP is, well, that means people aren't buying as much. There's a contraction in overall economic activity, and thus we got to lower interest rates to stimulate consumption and demand. But if you do that and we still have high inflation, that's a problem. And the tariffs are figuring into those decisions and those models. So that's why I think the president's going to be a bit hesitant to really dive too much into that particular issue. Because there's not really a lot of good to report. Now, in fairness, he's only been in office 2 months. So, a little less than 2 months, honestly. So, we haven't really had a chance for his policies to bake in. We have seen a slight decline in the price of oil, but I think that's because of a decline in economic activity. And the latest data shows that the consumer sentiment is down rather considerably. So all these are factors that are complicated, that are figuring into the mix. But I was a little shocked to see the Atlanta Fed come out and predict negative GDP. And, of course, the markets are signaling problems ahead as well. The NASDAQ losing 9% in 10 days. Big tech taking it on the chin. Investors loading up on U.S. Treasuries. The yield fell as a result. That's because when demand's up, the yield goes down. They can sell them for a higher price, and thus the yield is lower. When demand is lower because investors are placing their money in equities, well, then the Fed has to auction those off at a higher yield. Just plain old demand and supply. I know that our smart audience knows this, but you know who doesn't understand that simple concept, Rhino? It's a rhetorical question. I know. Bernie Sanders and Chuck Schumer and the rest of the Democrats. Now, am I right in hearing this news that they intend to be disruptive during tonight's speech? Well, what did you just tell me that they're thinking about doing there?
Well, I mean, there have been reports including the use of noisemakers or air horns, or I saw one report that included eggs, which,
oh my God,
depending on how the eggs are used, it could be a federal offense, or at the very least could show just how disconnected the left is from reality. Even though they're screaming about the price of eggs, they can afford to buy them to be prop.
Oh, my gosh. Well, I hope they make jerks of themselves, honestly, because they're just going to play, I believe, into the majority of Americans' hands, is what I think. And look no further than Monday, Senate Democrats. You've seen this probably. They blocked a bill introduced by Republicans to prohibit male athletes out of female sports. So, in other words, they fully support the idea of
dudes in dresses
playing against the girls. Insane. If I'm not mistaken, every single Democrat voted against this, right? I don't think they got a single one. So why is that important? Because something we've talked about many times, these sorts of bills, you can't pass them through the reconciliation process as you can bills dealing with revenue and taxes, budgetary issues. You got to have 60 votes. So having only 53 Republicans in the upper chamber necessitates at least 7 Democrats joining Republicans to pass this common sense legislation. And they saw fit to block it. This is incredible. Keep doing it, Democrats. The majority of the American people aren't with you. This is a party, of course, Rhino, that constantly maintains and promotes the idea to the country that they're all about fairness and equity. Except when it comes to female competition, sporting competition. And, of course, other crazy stuff related to that as well. Like allowing
dudes in dresses
to go to the same bathroom and locker rooms and so forth. They're perfectly fine with that as long as they identify as such. Keep doing it, Democrats. We're coming right back in the Element Wealth studio.
Come on. Middays with Gerard Gibert.
All right, we are back
on SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Early in the morning.
I got to tune in tonight. I mean, we were planning to do it anyway because we want to hear what the president has to say and share our thoughts with the audience tomorrow. But I feel like I'm even more motivated at the prospect of the Democrats just showing up and, dare I say it, acting like asses. I apologize. That's a little out of character for me, but I think I have to call it what it is and ground that analysis in reality. If you're going to show up in the people's house and comport yourself like that, now these are the same people that just Friday, right, were condemning and castigating the President of the United States for his behavior with this nutcase Zelensky, who shows up in this country needing the help, the assistance from the only people who could really legitimately help him put an end to the war. That was the goal, end the bloodshed, Zelensky. And he shows up and acts like a jerk at their urging, we're now finding. Don't accept that deal from Trump. They cannot stand the idea that after this war just languished with, I saw the number of deaths. I was astonished. Did you know it was that high?
Oh, yeah. It's been bad, and it just keeps getting worse. Like, one of the most telling statistics from the Ukrainian conflict is that the average age of a fighting man in the Ukrainian army at this point in time is 43 years old. The average age.
In other words, just as J.D. Vance, the vice president, said, they're having to conscript them to the line to fight.
Oh, yeah, and there are, while it's impossible to know the exact numbers, but there's a sizable enough portion of the male population of Ukraine to obviously make a difference that have holed up in their apartments, in their homes, become shut-ins, do not walk a step outside for the last 3 years for fear of a black van rolling up, soldiers hopping out, grabbing him, and next thing he knows, he's on the front line.
Well, just 2 days ago, I'm sure you probably saw this, Russia suffered its record losses of vehicles. The Ukrainian forces destroyed 3,472 vehicles. Unbelievable. During the month of February, and according to reports I've seen, Russia's lost...
They've lost a ton.
And I'm not sure we have accurate numbers on that.
Because the Ukrainian numbers are going to be a little inflated, obviously, to help with morale, and the Russian numbers are going to be tiny compared to what they actually are because, well, the Russian government simply does not have the capability of telling the truth. It's just not in. It's not in them.
So for over 3 years, reports I'm seeing, over 850,000. Is that right?
That's about the average. Yeah, there are some estimates that it's as low as 500,000, and there are other estimates that it's as high as 2 million.
That's insane. For what? A little patch of turf? Well, my fear is that, honestly, and maybe I'm overshooting this, and that's fine, I'm seeing some people that are starting to kind of lean more friendly into Russia. Just because of the way goofy Zelensky conducted himself Friday, it's turned Americans even more fiercely against Ukraine, and I'm with them. I mean, the money, we can't account for it. I don't know what we're getting for it, if anything, and that's always been my squabble, that what value are we getting for that investment? But on the other hand, I don't trust Russia or Putin either, and I'm not suggesting that that's happening, but I don't know if you saw the tweet from Marjorie Taylor Greene that concerned me a little bit. She made a statement about it. See if I can find it here. That was a bit disturbing in my view, just about where she stands on the matter. And she said something about how historically the movies have always portrayed Russia in a negative light, but maybe they shouldn't. I'm paraphrasing a bit. But, heck, I don't trust them either. Yeah, have you ever noticed how for decades now Hollywood always made Russia the bad guy in the movies? It's like Americans have been programmed to believe Russia must be the enemy all the time.
That hasn't really been the case for years.
I think that's right.
Like when 9/11 happened, instantly the Hollywood bad guy became a dude wearing robes and a turban with a beard.
I think that's right.
They even remade Red Dawn, and Russia wasn't the bad guy anymore. It was North Korea.
Fox News, SuperTalk News next, then Gordon Fellows.
Middays with Gerard Gibert is brought to you by the Mississippi Business Journal. Visit msbusinessjournal.com. Scott Coopwood, publisher. And now, another hour of the talk that keeps Mississippi talking. Middays with Gerard Gibert.
Begin your transition now.
Now on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It's hour 2 of Middays. We're coming at you live from the Element Wealth Studio. It's our pleasure to welcome now Gordon Fellows. He's the president of the Mississippi Bankers Association. Hey, Gordon, good to see you today.
Hey, Gerard. Thanks for having me. Always good to be with you.
You bet. Let's start out, Gordon, talking about a major announcement that came out of the U.S. Treasury Department last 2 or 3 days, and that is that U.S. companies will not be required to report this beneficial ownership stuff. This was a beneficial ownership information, BOI is the acronym for that. This is something that was imposed during the Biden administration that would have inflicted quite a hardship on especially our small and mid-sized businesses who would likely have to engage the services of attorneys and CPAs and the like to fill out all this paperwork, and not doing so could result in a very stiff penalty from the federal government. Looks like that's essentially been, for the most part, dismantled. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so the beneficial ownership rule was just part of what I call the regulatory tsunami of the last few years, and that's not an original term. That's a term that a lot of folks around the banking industry have used because there's been so much new regulation. The beneficial ownership rule was just one of those, the positive thing we've been hoping for as the new administration has settled in is sort of we get a regulatory reset, and so a lot of these rules get pulled back. And this week has been sort of a big week for that. The Treasury rule, that announcement was sort of made on Sunday, right, with beneficial ownership getting pulled back. That was a good step. Yesterday, the FDIC announced that they were pausing implementation of 4 different rules that they were working on. One of those was related to board director responsibilities that we thought would have gotten the boards way more involved in management than necessary, and probably created a bunch of costs because of that. So, we're beginning to sort of see several of these sort of really complex financial rules beginning to pull back a little bit, which is good and helpful. That doesn't mean that there's not adequate regulations in place. I think there are, but some of this sort of overwhelming new regulations that were coming out of the last few years are beginning to peel back a little bit. So certainly good news for small business owners as it relates to the beneficial ownership rule. I do think it's still going to apply to foreign-owned companies, which I think was really law enforcement's point, and I think that's probably a good thing. That really ties in, the beneficial ownership rule ties into the broader anti-money laundering regime that banks are subject to, and we are hopeful that we'll begin to sort of see more focus on safety and soundness, and as it relates to bank regulations, and a little less focus on all of sort of the secondary purposes of regulation. So it's interesting. It's an interesting time for sure.
So, Gordon, you and I have talked about this before. Of course, the entire nation, especially from a business perspective, we're all anxiously awaiting to see the outcome of this budget debate process, looking in particular for the extension of the existing tax environment, which was implemented in the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, the so-called Trump tax cuts in 2017. But it's important also to recognize just what an impact regulations have on the economy. And you happen to represent a group of people that may be the most regulated of any industry, honestly. Next to that would be health, your money and health, by far the most regulated industries. And this has placed financial hardship on the financial industry, and those costs have to be passed on to consumers. So it's good news that we have, I think, a more business-friendly administration that's looking to strip away many of these regulations that honestly just were more political, honestly, in nature than they were functional.
Yeah, I think that's right. And it's important when we're talking about bank regulations. We think not all regulations are bad, right? Like safety and soundness focused regulations in a regulatory scheme that helps ensure depositors are safe and the banks don't engage in unnecessary risk is good for the economy, right? And so, but when you think about the regulatory structure that banks live in, there are 3 or 4 federal agencies, depending on the type of bank, and then a state agency for most banks. And not only are you regulated, you're constantly examined, right? Yeah. Every 12 to 18 months, there's people from the government in the bank, kind of making sure you're complying with everything. And if you're a bank that's over $10 billion, you're constantly examined. There's always examiners in the bank. And so you got regulations and you have sort of this examination structure. And so as the new group sort of settles in, we're hopeful that some of the, to use your words, some of the more political regulations, not what I would say the regulations that aren't safety and soundness focused, but are sort of secondary focused, that some of those are going to peel back. Yeah. One of the big ones we're watching really closely is the 1071 rule. It's part of Dodd-Frank. This is the small business data collection rule, right? And this is a really good example. The legislation that created the rule sort of said we want the CFPB to collect 12 points of data on small businesses. The Biden administration took those 12 points of data and blew it up to like 83 points of data, right? And so we're hopeful that gets scaled in a good bit. And I use an example, right? The new administration has named several of their agency heads. So there's a guy named Jonathan McKernan who's been appointed to be the new CFPB director. He's not through the confirmation process yet. But I think they're going to vote on him later this week in the Senate Banking Committee. McKernan is sort of a known quantity, and he's the kind of guy that tells you what he thinks. And I think that we'll see him really focus in on tightening up the CFPB in particular, right? Where some of these rules have sort of been really much broader than Congress intended them to be. I think we'll see a lot of tightening there as McKernan sort of settles in. So hopefully the Senate Banking Committee moves his nomination through pretty easily later this week.
Are your members concerned about tariffs and some of the fiscal policy we're seeing coming out of Washington? We see the 10-year coming down, but you've probably seen, I talked about it earlier in the program, the Atlanta Fed is predicting negative GDP for the quarter.
Right, yeah, and I was actually at the Atlanta Fed for a conference last week, and they didn't prep us on that. I wish we would have talked about that a little bit last week, but yeah, it's interesting. The first call I got about that was from a farm bank this morning, a bank in the Delta, and of course, sort of the China response to the tariffs and what that's going to do to the farm economy is a big concern. And Frank, Delta Counselor, Mike at the Farm Bureau are probably better qualified to talk about the intricacies of that than I am. But I can tell you, I know that farmers have been struggling for a while now, and that I don't think this tariff situation is going to help that. I think it's going to make that a lot more challenging. If I'm a policymaker in D.C., I'm keeping my eyes close on ag and how the tariffs impact ag right out of the gate. I assume that there's going to be some real reshoring of some manufacturing back into the country that'll probably be a good thing. But I do think prices are probably going to go up. I think sort of stepping away from that and kind of looking a little more big picture. You mentioned the regional Fed bank in Atlanta. All the regional Feds collect data on what business expectations are going to be over the next 6 months, and from like November to January, that number got really positive, right? And then as January sort of began, a lot of the metrics aren't really tracking against where we thought we were going to be in November after the election. And I think some of the uncertainty around the tariffs has slowed down nationwide some of what was expected to be early corporate investment. Now, I don't think that's necessarily in playing out in Mississippi the way it may be playing out in some other places. Yeah. But I sort of noticed that as a data point that was kind of interesting. Some uncertainty around the tariffs and probably around Doge too, and all the sort of move fast, break stuff mentality that Doge has brought is probably creating a little bit of hesitancy on some big employers and some big companies on how they want to deploy capital. So hopefully that all kind of moves quickly here, and we kind of get into a little more of a settled economy pretty soon. Yeah,
I think you're right, exactly right. It's just so much happening in such a short period of time. There's just a lot of anxiety and uncertainty around that. We just need the dust to settle and figure out where we are. Gordon, always good talking to you. Appreciate you coming on, and I'm sure we'll be talking to you soon. Thanks a lot, man.
Thanks, Gerard. Good to see you.
Yeah, man. We're coming right back in the Element Well studio.
So they say, is the fruit of all evil today. But if you ask for a rise, it's no surprise that they're giving none
And now, the talk that keeps Mississippi talking.
Now, on to the real part.
Dynamite! On SuperTalk, Mississippi.
She complicated.
We're back with you in the Element Well studio. Dr. Katherine Pannel is coming up in the next segment. So, as part of Ontario's response to the imposed U.S. tariffs on Canadian goods, the government of that province has directed the liquor control organization to indefinitely stop all sales of U.S. alcohol products in our stores and online, and to stop wholesale sales of U.S. products to restaurants, bars, groceries, and other retailers. So they're like stripping the shelves of liquor, of American liquor.
Well, the funniest part of that is they were already doing that when the tariffs were first announced.
Yep.
And then everybody made fun of them because they already paid for those goods on their shelves.
That was dumb. But as far as going forward, that will have an impact on American exporters into the country. And the same is true for a number of other American commodities as well. So we should distinguish here, because Canada has already applied a response. Mexico hasn't. They say they're still waiting it out to see how all this is gonna I guess, blend and stew. So that's kind of where they are. The EU, by the way, just announced that they're going to increase their defense spending and also aid to Ukraine. They should. That's the whole point. If you look at the aid to Ukraine, they have exceeded the U.S. a little bit, but they should exceed it by a lot. In fact, I'm not sure there should be any U.S. dollars flowing to the country. Europe has much more to gain/lose with respect to the outcome of the conflict, of the war. But I'm just astonished at the number of lives that have been lost. This is insane, which is why it made sense for Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky to come to terms with a deal. And I don't think such a deal ends the war immediately, but if America has economic interests in the country through this minerals deal, surely that serves as a strong deterrent from Putin doing something stupid.
Well, as of 10:37 a.m. this very morning,
okay,
President Zelensky released a statement of which the final paragraph says, regarding the agreement on minerals and security, Ukraine is ready to sign it at any time and in any convenient format. We see this agreement as a step toward greater security and solid security guarantees, and I truly hope it will work effectively.
Okay.
Truly hope it will work effectively.
Well, I think the latest statement from the president was he's got to show genuine interest in achieving peace.
Which that was the first line of the statement. Okay. I would like to reiterate Ukraine's commitment to peace.
Okay. Well, he got the message, perhaps. So if I were the president, Rhino, honestly, knowing the deal maker that he is, I think I'd sit on that for a little while and let him stew about it, just how grave the mistake was that he made. Just in his behavior. You don't do that in the Oval Office.
He mentions that in the paragraph before the paragraph about the minerals. Our meetings in Washington at the White House on Friday did not go the way it was supposed to be. It is regrettable that it happened this way. It is time to make things right. We would like future cooperation and communication to be constructive.
He stopped short of an explicit apology, though, right? That's unacceptable. Now, is he one of these people that just can't do that? And that's a problem. That's a problem in society in general. We're all so fearful of just acknowledging and admitting that we made a mistake and just apologizing for it. And I believe most people react positively to that. Now, of course, you'll always have the folks that say, well, it's really not genuine. He's just saying that. Okay, fine. But you know what? You did it. I think it would be received positively. I think the president would receive it positively. Because the alternative is a vacuum forming where, well, he feels no remorse, no regret. So if you put it out there and you state it on the global stage, at a minimum, you could argue about the genuineness of it. I get that. But doing nothing is worse, in my view. And he's stopping short of a full apology, and I think that's a problem. But I am worried about these tariffs just because I think people are looking for relief. They're looking for price relief. This isn't going to give it to them in the short term. Certainly may in the long term. We're seeing some signs of American growth in manufacturing. There's no doubt about that. You saw one of the big Taiwan chip makers say, yeah, we're going to invest significant, like $500 billion or something, I think. In, $100 billion.
TSMC.
Thank you. I'm thinking about Apple. Said $500 billion. So TSMC, a major chip maker. And honestly, I think there's a couple of reasons for that. One is just to avoid any sort of tariff retaliation or imposition by the Trump administration. But I think more importantly, they're just sitting ducks for China. And right now, we rely heavily on their chip manufacturing, their semiconductor industry. That's just a fact. Can't do without it. Just as we rely on oil refineries across the Middle East. That's a problem as well. We don't have the refining capacity. We have the ability to produce and extract from the ground all the oil we need to power this country, but we stop short of that with respect to refining capacity. And my fear is that if Russia had its way, it seized control of that, working with Iran and China to really do harm to this nation if we can't get the gas and the diesel we need to power the country. I think that's their ultimate goal. I really do. So all that's working rather feverishly, furiously is a better way to term it, in the mix here. And I think the president will talk about that tonight, and we all look forward to that. It's long term, it's not a good thing. I don't disagree with the president's moves to level the playing field with our trading partners in China and Mexico. And more importantly, he's trying to get them to be serious about the flow of fentanyl. Now, the truth is, only about 1% of the fentanyl that enters this country comes from Canada. The vast majority of it from south of our border through Mexico, and a lot of that is driven by China, and I think China is in cahoots with the corrupt Mexican government. Maybe not so much now as they have been in the past, but they've always struggled with corruption. Always.
Well, always is a long time, but in most recent memory, yeah.
I have a hard time remembering where that wasn't the case.
You'd have to go back to probably pre-World War II.
Yeah. Well, that's a long time ago.
Yeah.
Before we were around. So, but I don't have any confidence that they're not under the table in cahoots with China. I really don't. And I think China does seek to kill American youth with this fentanyl stuff. There's no doubt. And Mexico's facilitating it to a great extent. And that needs to end. And the president believes that tariffs are the most effective way to combat that. He could be right. Time will tell. I think at this point they've done next to nothing, both Canada and Mexico, to stem the flow of fentanyl. And I think the president's reaction is, okay, we told you hadn't done anything, so have some tariffs. Unfortunately, and this is the difficult part about that, is that affects Americans, American workers, the cost of living, all the above. May just take a recession, as the Atlanta Fed predicts, to rid ourselves of this sticky inflation. But there's a fair amount of economic fears. You know something else? This may sound radical. I've thought about this, and I even thought about whether or not I should say it. I'm not so sure NATO survives as is, Rhino. It just feels like there's some instability there, where you've got our president saying we're not helping Ukraine anymore, and you got the EU sort of filling that void. It just feels like that we're starting to separate a little bit. I'm not saying that's necessarily a bad thing, honestly.
I mean, if Europe won't pick up more of the slack, it's really not a great deal for us.
I agree. And I totally agree with the president in demanding they take a more serious interest, financially and otherwise, in the NATO effort. We're coming right back with Dr. Pannel.
From the Super Middays with Gerard Gibert.
It is on.
On SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Middays. We're coming at you live from the Element Well studio. We welcome now Dr. Katherine Pannel. She's a DO and medical director of Right Track Medical Group and legislative chairwoman of the Mississippi Psychiatric Association. We also have on the line Agnie Fletcher, a teacher from Laurel, Mississippi, who lost her brother to a Kratom overdose last year. Dr. Pannel, Agnie, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, yes.
You bet. So we wanted to get you on in response to a discussion we had last week with an individual who uses this substance, Kratom, to fight their bout with alcohol and pain, chronic pain. And we also had a physician on as well. And both of them see things, I think, a little differently than you guys do. They support relaxation of regulations of this substance. But you guys have a different take on it. Dr. Pannel, tell us about your concerns about Kratom and perhaps deregulating it and de-restricting it.
There's a lot of misinformation out there about Kratom. And if you go and you look on the American Kratom Association's website, they tout it as being like a safe, all-natural alternative for energy and pain control. But what they don't tell you about is all the hidden dangers of Kratom. The FDA has already established that Kratom is an opioid. It works on the same receptors as things such as fentanyl, heroin, and any other opiates. So at a low dose, it has a stimulant effect. At a high dose, it has some pain control effects, but it's also highly addictive and can be deadly in overdose.
Okay. So, Angie, tell us your story with respect to your brother.
Thank you so much for having me on. I actually want to read this so that I don't leave out any details. First of all, thank you for having me on. The story of Matt Everett, my brother, is very dear to my heart. After a lifelong battle with addiction, Matt was found deceased in his bed on the afternoon of July the 24th, 2024, at the age of 52. Now, Matt did battle almost every drug and completed rehab about 4 times throughout his life, defeating each addiction that he suffered from. But after a heartbreaking divorce, Matt found Kratom, which was sold in a small bottle at a local gas station near our home, and his life completely changed as it numbed his emotional pain as well as his back pain. This new habit was very costly for him. He ended up losing his lake house, his truck, another truck that our mom gave him, a car, his part-time job, as well as all of his possessions. Matt lived with our elderly mom and began to lie, steal, and pawn her possessions as well. And this was not like him at all. After Matt's death, we discovered paperwork revealing that he was borrowing money from various loan companies, not paying them back. We also retrieved our mom's prized jewelry, Matt's laptop and sunglasses, but mom's gun, personal computer, and a whole lot of other stuff had already been sold. Hidden in a bag in Matt's room were other sentimental items that we found that he was apparently days away from pawning, which included our mom's precious wedding ring. Our mother was taken advantage of due to her age and vulnerable mental state. And after Matt's death, I taught her how to download her banking app, only to discover that close to around $60 a day, give or take, was spent every day at gas stations and smoke shops, totaling around $10,000 in his last 6 months on this earth. Mom was 3 months behind on all of her utilities, and her cable had been cut off. Now, keep in mind, he was living with her. She was also being sued by many different credit card agencies because Matt was hiding her mail. But Matt, however, was once Citizen of the Year for Jones County, with the peak of his career falling during the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina. And during his last year of life, he presented with massive weight loss, severe anxiety, memory deficits, depression, extreme mood changes, paranoia, excessive crying spells. Matt also took our family's coin collection passed down from our dad and spent it at a local gas station like it was basic change just to purchase Kratom. And this coin collection was being saved to be given to my son, but Matt later apologized to my son and admitted to him that he'd do anything to get Kratom, and that each day he required more and more just to feel good. After Matt's death, family members cleaned up almost 1,000 bottles of Hush, which contains Kratom, and we knew immediately what had stopped his heart. Bottles were found hidden all over the house, car, yard, woods, basically everywhere. And when he was alive, he admitted to us that he did love this drug, but he also hated it because he knew that it was destroying his life, and he couldn't go a single day without it. He had a lot of potential to do great things and had done great things in the past, and I just feel like his life mattered, and I need him so much right now, having also just lost our mom 3 weeks ago. Nothing will bring him back to us, but I just don't want any other family to have to go through this, as Kratom is cheap and sitting on all public gas station shelves and smoke shops for anyone of any ages, to purchase at any time.
appreciate you sharing that story, and very sorry for your loss, Angie.
Thank you.
What was the catalyst? I mean, what I guess motivated your brother to start ingesting the substance?
I found on a laptop that he did not want me to get into. A friend of his said, and he really did want to get off of drugs, that in order to get off of drugs, he could substitute Kratom in the place of it, and he had no idea that he was going to become as addictive and it's little bottles of Hush that we found everywhere. So I think he had no intentions whatsoever of becoming madly addicted to it, but it really changed him psychologically, and the whole family dynamic changed because he lived with my mom. They lived right beside me. I've basically lost all of them now. My dad, now my brother, and my mom. I really just feel like he was looking for something to ease the pain of the heartbreak from his divorce, as well as he did have a lot of back pain. And he wanted to do this instead of other drugs that were basically frowned upon publicly.
So did he ever seek help, or did you guys ever encourage him to seek help?
We didn't realize the Kratom issue was as severe because of all the lies involved in the money spending. My mom would not confide in me that they didn't have anything because she didn't want me coming at him to protect our family. And it was after he died that we realized how severe things were, or we would have done anything to help him. We adored him.
I see. Wow. And over, you may have said it, but when did he start and when did he finally pass away? When did he start using Kratom? How long?
I would say since he passed away last July of 2024, it was probably somewhere between 2 and 3 years before that he started using it. And he admitted to me that it became something that he needed more and more with each passing day, and that it became something that was all that he could think about.
I see.
So after a couple of years of it getting intensely worse, July the 24th, 2024, on a Wednesday afternoon, is a horrible nightmare that I will never forget.
I understand. So, Dr. Pannel, we had someone on last week that touts the positive effects of this drug, and now we have a devastating effect. How are we, just average citizens, to reconcile that?
I mean, you definitely have to listen to the experts and even do your own research. The fellow that was on last week, I mean, there were a couple of things that he said that just weren't true, saying that you cannot die from Kratom alone when there are numerous studies published by the CDC showing that people have overdosed and died with just Kratom alone. So it can cause death. We know this. Saying that it's not an opioid, it has been established to be an opioid. It works on the exact same receptors. And words are very important in this argument. You'll hear from the American Kratom Association that Kratom is safer than heroin or fentanyl. I mean, I think we need to look at that as, no, Kratom may be less deadly than heroin and fentanyl, but it is still deadly and it's still dangerous. So, I mean, the Kratom industry is a multi-billion-dollar industry, and they do a great job of marketing it. And they again tout it as being this wonder drug that's safe and all natural, and it causes no harm. But what we're doing is essentially people are trading one addiction for another.
So we received a letter, I'm sure you're well familiar with it, that was signed and endorsed by a number of organizations inside the state of Mississippi, and it's addressed to Mississippi legislators, encouraging them to support they support the addition of Kratom to a Schedule 3 of the Uniform Controlled Substances Act. So that would make it less available, right? Right.
Well, it gets it off the counters, which is the main goal. There's not jail time associated with it, so we're not looking to lock up everybody that's found with Kratom. Okay. And we did this with tianeptine a couple years ago, and it has been hugely successful. There's also a myth that we're going to create a black market for Kratom. We're not seeing that in other states that have already banned it.
I got you. Angie, we're going to let you go. Thanks so much for joining us, and thanks for coming on and sharing the story. Again, our condolences.
Thank you for allowing me to tell his story. I appreciate you all.
You bet. Thank you. Dr. Pannel, if you stick around, we'll keep talking about this. We're
Thanks.
coming right back in the Element Wealth studio.
With a mambo beat, the Mardi Gras mambo, 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 Mardi Gras mambo, 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 Mardi Gras mambo. Down in New Orleans,
You know what that means.
Middays with Gerard Gibert.
We'll do it live
on SuperTalk, Mississippi.
We are back with you in the Element Well studio. Dr. Katherine Pannel is our guest. Okay, so what is it that you think we should do from a regulatory perspective?
I think we do ultimately need to get this off the convenience store shelves, and the best way to do that is making it a Schedule 3.
Okay.
That will, it still leaves the option if the FDA starts to study it, we get more studies. If we show that there is any benefit, this still leaves the option for us to be able to prescribe it. And it gives us the option to study it more, to figure out dosages, what to do in overdose, what to do when you're toxic. Because right now we don't even know if you overdose, we don't have a reversal agent for it. So it really... It gets it off the shelves, but leaves the option to learn about it more in case that we do find something positive. We can still be able to prescribe it.
What would you say to those like the user we had on last week that basically said this has changed her life in a positive way, but yet then we have another with Angie we just had on talking about how it destroyed her family and ultimately led to the death of her brother. I mean, that just seems like such a stark contrast in outcomes.
Right, and I feel like you're benefiting from it. You're not going to talk about or promote things that are going to make it regulated. I know she equated it to coffee, which kind of it tickled me a little bit, but what she may find down the road is that she's having to use larger and larger amounts to get the same effect that she's getting now. I wonder if she's ever tried to get off. I bet it would be a huge struggle to get off. The withdrawal from Kratom is horrible. The detox from Kratom is horrible. So, I hate to say it, but I think we really need to look at, she did get off opioids and alcohol, but did she trade an addiction? And in that case, I would say yes. Kratom is highly addictive.
I see. Okay, but if she chose to keep using it, she would still be able to access it, right? Even though it would be changed on the schedule.
Absolutely,
okay.
Yes.
Okay, but what you advocate for, I want to make sure I get this right, is just that it's not just sold over the counter in the convenience store as it is today.
That is right.
Is there any restriction on age today?
No.
My
11-year-old
could?
Yeah, my 11-year-old sitting behind us right now could go walk into a convenience store and get Kratom.
So why do you think this feels like it sort of slipped through the crack?
It did. They were very wise. They slid it through the cracks and termed it as a supplement. So when it's passed as a supplement, that the FDA can't get involved. They don't do the rigorous studies because it is a supplement. So they got to bypass all of that.
A supplement. Is there something special about categorizing it as a supplement?
It is. Just that it doesn't have to follow the strict, rigorous studies that the FDA requires of things that are not substances or supplements like medications.
Okay. So do we need to review perhaps the categorization standard?
I would love to see that too. I don't think it needs to be a supplement. And I do. I think that we do. I think that is one thing that we and the American Kratom Association can all get on board with is we do have to have more studies about Kratom.
Okay. Well, I'll ask you this question as well because fentanyl is, of course, is prominent in the national conversation. Certainly, our president is imposing tariffs in an effort to stem the flow of that. I know a lot of people will ingest it, don't even know that they are, right?
That's right.
But it's included in other substances, other materials. Don't know. Next thing you know, they're either super sick or dead, which is a big problem.
That's right.
But there are some who know they are, right? They're addicted to it.
Sure.
And they're doing it. So my concern, Dr. Pannel, it's really not a concern, more of a question is, it just feels like if people want to put that stuff in their body, they're going to do it. And somebody's going to sell it to them. How do we address that?
So I'm a lifelong Mississippian. I love Mississippi. I love patients in Mississippi. I want to protect Mississippians. I don't want us to become like in Oregon where we just basically say, take and use whatever you want. They did that, and it has proven not to work. I mean, we have to have some regulation. I mean, the overdose deaths in the United States have fallen except for in Oregon, where they've actually increased. And it's because of their liberal, drug policies. And I just want to get ahead of it here in Mississippi, get this off the shelves, and keep Mississippians safe.
So what's the status of any legislation to do that? So
Senate Bill 2355 looks like it's kind of held up in political limbo right now. I don't know that Representative Horan is going to even bring it up. I implore him to bring it up. I think this is the best way to go with Kratom, is making it Schedule 3. But if it doesn't, there's also Senate Bill 2354, which is in the AET committee in the House. And it will at least give the Mississippi Department of Health the regulatory ability to go in and test the Kratom that's on convenience store shelves right now.
Okay. Is there a House bill?
It died, unfortunately.
It died, okay. So there's a couple of Senate bills that are sitting in House committees.
They are.
Waiting
Deadline day, just...
Right,
waiting to either die or move.
I got you.
Yep.
All right, Dr. Katherine Pannel, thanks so much for coming on and joining us. Yep, you bet. Folks, we're stepping aside for a break. It's top of the hour. That means Fox News, SuperTalk News. But then we've got the afternoon portion of Middays. That's up next.
Pick 'em up and put 'em down. Can't stay on the ground. Shake it and don't let go. Shake it till you can't no more. Everybody move your hips. Go on, don't let your back go. Give it everything you got. You got to move it by the groove. Everybody just live it.
And now, the talk that keeps Mississippi talking.
That's what I like to listen to.
You're listening to Middays with Gerard Gibert. Here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Winter is here again, oh Lord. I've been home and here, oh Lord. I hope she holds on a little longer. Send a letter on a
Welcome back, everyone. It's Middays live in the Element Wealth studio. We thank you so much for joining us. The afternoon portion of the program is now live. Let's check some of the text line. I apologize, folks. Haven't been able to get to it too much today. So much going on. I hate that our Democrats are gender confused, shooting down the bill, keeping boys from girls' sports. Yeah, we just talked about that over there in the Senate. I believe every Senate Democrat voted in alignment against the legislation that would have prohibited participation in female sports by biological males. Unbelievable. Darren in Jackson, I'd have to live in a $100,000 anything with a bath and a kitchen. The endless supply of money has already ended from the U.S. That was earlier in the morning, he said. Mobile's crew of cowboys was always an interesting on floats adjourned in political, can't really follow this, punches at Mobile County politics. I don't know exactly. That's Marshall and Terry. Help us out there, Marshall. Explain what you're saying. The Dems are encouraging disruptions tonight. Pieces of crap, says Gary from Tishomingo.
I think you meant adorned instead of adjourned.
Oh, okay. That makes sense. I got you. Yep, you're right. Reading it again. Political punches. What does that mean, though? What's he saying there?
Like if you had a mayor with a big nose, you'd have a big caricature of the mayor with an overly large nose.
That's pretty cool.
That kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's pretty neat. Okay. Thank you for that, Marshall. Yeah, that's what we were saying, Gary. Rhino did some research on that and informed us of that as well, that we are expecting significant disruptions. Maybe I'm old school. I just don't think that's appropriate. I don't care which party it is or who the individuals are to conduct oneself in a disruptive fashion in the United States Capitol. Especially,
I recall calling Marjorie Taylor Greene stupid for walking right into a broadside trying to show her butt in public during one of Biden's speeches.
Agree. And I understand the point she was making. I just thought it was inappropriate. That's all. So can't we at least agree on what is proper decorum?
No.
In these chambers that are supposed to be the height of democracy and really the center of power, not only in this country but the world.
That would require having, well, one, self-respect, and two, respect for the position they're elected to, and three, respect for the country as a whole. I don't think they have any of that.
That's what's disturbing at a minimum. And so they're coming tonight, and if they disrupt and they throw stuff and blurt out craziness, well then I think they're disrespecting the people. That's no different than Zelensky disrespecting America and its traditions. It's not dignified. And gosh, can't we at a minimum find some time and place where we can treat each other with respect? I get it, Democrats. You don't agree. I didn't agree with everything Joe Biden said in his dang State of the Union addresses either. But I wouldn't interrupt him in the middle of it and make a fool of myself with all kinds of little grandstanding antics. And as you say all the time, it's purely for attention. They know they'll make national news. You'll hear the names of people you don't even know who the hell they are right now. Would you agree? That's exactly what's going to happen.
It's not even the attention they will receive from the talking heads in mainstream media that I remind you have been lying to your face for the last half decade or more. It's just we can prove the last half decade. It's not really the attention from those. They already are friends with them.
Right.
It's all the adulation that'll be heaped on them by the clapping seals and the idiots that vote for them.
Boy, ain't that the truth. And that's what powers them. That's what inspires them. That's what induces them to act crazy, because they know exactly that'll be the reaction. Matt in Burnsville says we have to go through this to right the ship. I assume, Matt, you're talking about tariffs and the imposition of tariffs. And what do you think will be the outcome of that? And I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just curious. What do you think will be the outcome as far as righting the ship? Now, I believe the president, his viewpoint is we would get better border control as far as the flow of fentanyl. He's made that very clear. And that he thinks we would level the playing field with respect to import, export, imbalance, tariffs charged by other countries. I remember distinctly in his first term when he made that threat to France about the tariffs they imposed on American wine and alcohol that they import, that we don't with reciprocal tariffs. And then they dropped them, as I recall. So I think that was a beautiful negotiating point from a position of leverage. I like that. So will this, as the president certainly projects, will this drive more manufacturing from abroad into the country? I mean, it sure seems at this point, some of the investments we've seen of late, especially from the high-tech industry, Apple, their big announcement. What was the other one early on? Stargate, the big consortium of Oracle and a couple of other companies, $500 billion. Now we got the Taiwan semiconductor maker announcing a $100 billion investment. Man, I think all that's fantastic. And I do think to some extent in these new, if you will, in these new projects, they're saying, well, yeah, maybe I would have looked at doing this overseas in the past, but given the tariff environment and honestly the fact that the majority of my customers are going to be in this country, we're just going to set up shop here. I think that makes perfect sense. I'm not quite as optimistic about the number of jobs those kinds of manufacturing facilities, or any for that matter, create, because we're making such major advances in manufacturing technology and automation and robotics. We just don't need as many people. Now, the good news is that the original reason for so much of our manufacturing moving overseas was because of the low cost of labor. But when you strip the labor need out of the production process, that levels the playing field into itself. So guess what? You know, you and I talk about all this all the time. That's how we've always solved our most critical problems, is with human innovation. And this is an example of it. Humans have innovated and figured out, wait, you know, instead of having these 10 people that make this stuff, we can install this automation, these robotics, these manufacturing technologies that can replicate, actually do it more efficiently. And guess what? They don't get sick, they don't quit, they don't take vacation, and you don't have protesting by unions demanding more. Because remember, the longshoremen, their big deal, we don't want any automation. We want you to keep paying those people 6 figures to do something that a robot could easily do, or one person instead of 3. I got to make sure you wrote that down right. Give me $100,000 a year for that, plus egregious benefits on top of that, and all that gets passed on to us. That's what drove all the manufacturing abroad. But innovation and automation, I believe, is the main stimulus for bringing it back, because they know, we can actually make stuff over here, and we don't have to bear these ridiculous labor costs. We can do it with automation, and that essentially levels out the cost playing field relative to producing abroad with low-cost labor, often child labor, which is bad, and oppressive labor conditions. Often. And
it's not like this is even really a new concept. This is a concept as old as people. It's just another example of my old adage that people have been people as long as people have been people.
Yep.
I mean, I know this is not historically accurate, but it's painting a picture. Just imagine a group of cavemen standing around a large rock. You got Erg, Og, Root, and Ugh trying to figure out how to move the big rock. And then Mongo over there picks up a stick and uses it as a lever. A simple machine. Oh, 4 of us couldn't move big rock. Mongo moved big rock by himself.
So
they
true.
use technology to better their lives.
That's exactly right. And that is the dang point. Thank you for that. There's no way I could side with any labor group that says, don't bring in technology and automation. In other words, we want you to pay our outrageous compensation package. We want you, consumer, to bear the cost of that. We want to block companies from seeking to introduce efficiency into their models and optimize their bottom line. Well, think about government. Would we support the use of technology to automate government functions if it meant we could shrink the payroll of government? Wouldn't that be a reasonable expectation from taxpayers at all levels of government? Of course it would. Of course it would. I mean, that's just common sense. But unfortunately, we've been sort of hoodwinked for years by powerful unions who get in bed with politicians that support their crap. We're coming right back.
Rogers Day.
It's so awesome! Middays with Gerard Gibert.
Come on, let's get on with the show!
On SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Do you know what it means to miss New Orleans and miss it each night and day? I know I'm not wrong. The feeling's getting stronger the longer.
So in addition to the other retaliatory moves by Canada after the president slapped tariffs on 25% tariffs on many goods coming from Canada into this country, Ontario a couple of hours ago announced it is slapping an export tax on electricity to the United States. Wow, that's 1.5 million homes in Minnesota, Michigan, and New York are going to see their power bills go up rather dramatically as a result of that. So I want to see this war come to an end. I'm not faulting the president for his moves to level the playing field. I think tariffs are a valuable negotiating tool to do that. But just back and forth is going to cost us all in the meantime. So let's hope that we get some movement and that this winds down and comes to a swift end, because it's not helping either side, honestly. And I think he's right for pointing out the disparities. But it's pain in the meantime. So you should know also that March 12th, a 25% tariff on steel and aluminum goes into effect. April 2nd, 25% on autos, chips, and pharmaceuticals that come from Europe. And then April 2nd, reciprocal tariffs on agriculture. So we got more coming. I mean, this is part of the president's agenda, and I think he'll lay that out for us tonight. Should be interesting. Jerry in Waynesboro says, I look at the countries we fund, which is many, and they never work. They are in the streets protesting while a lot of Americans are working. Well, any aid that's going to countries that hate us is despicable. I completely agree with you, Jerry. I do think, though, many people grossly overestimate or overshoot foreign aid from this country. Historically, and I'm not saying it's nothing, but historically, the average over the last decade is about $45 billion a year. Just keep in mind that the budget this year is $7 trillion. So it's it's insignificant when you compare it to the total budget. And the only point I'm making is, when are we going to get serious with some significant cuts? Not just sort of cutting around the edges, which is what we've been doing. I'm all for that, but the fact is we got a budget right now that the United States House of Representatives has passed a framework for. All that means is all the details of how the numbers add up to the framework in the various areas has to be worked out. But the framework calls for spending $86 trillion over the next 10 years. $86 trillion. What's astonishing is that pre-pandemic, our spending was about $4.5 trillion, little less than that actually. So the average over the next 10 years, double what it was in 2019. We're not going in the right direction. Now, we certainly could outstrip that with economic growth, which produces more revenue to the Treasury. And in fact, if you look at the data, that's actually where the disparity is. We've increased revenues by about a third since that time period, but we've increased the spending by about 70%. So if we just spent to keep up with the growth in revenue, our deficits would not have grown the way they have from pre-pandemic levels of about $800 billion a year to last year $1.8 trillion, and on a run rate this year of $2.5 trillion. That after the first 4 months of the year, according to official Treasury data. Incredible. Let's see. Y'all are pushing Russian propaganda. We are? What propaganda have we pushed specifically? This is on the C Spire text line. What are they talking about?
That came in literally seconds after I finished saying that it is physically impossible for the Russian government to tell the truth.
Yeah, I made it quite clear that I don't trust either side. If you want to know the truth, I don't trust Zelensky. I don't trust Putin. I don't trust Russia. And I sure hope that even after, in the wake of the completely inappropriate content by Zelensky on American soil in the White House, the Oval Office, last Friday, that doesn't mean that all of a sudden Russia is the fair-haired child here and that we should favor them or support them. Quite the contrary. I think what it shows is you guys are both screwed up. That's what I take from it. And I will admit that I'm a little concerned about a tweet from Marjorie Taylor Greene, like we said, a sitting member of of the United States Congress. I think you nailed it, which she was just looking for attention.
That's pretty much all she's ever doing at any point in time is seeking attention.
And I want to say I generally respect and support her America First agenda and her support of the president, but it just looks to me like that's what happens to many of them. They get in that environment. They like to thrust themselves into the old limelight and get all the attention like we are right here. But I disagree with her when she says, Russia's really not the bad guy. What? Last I checked, Vladimir Putin, his goal is to replace this country, as I said, as the dominant superpower on the globe. He'd do whatever it takes to achieve that desire. I'm not even going to say it as a goal. I don't know that his countrymen are so much in favor of that. I think they want to live and they want to get out of these stupid wars. But you know what? If you don't go, I don't know what happens to you. But I don't trust him whatsoever. And while I certainly think the deal the president offered to Zelensky should have been accepted by Zelensky, and I do think it would have served as a strong deterrent to Russia, his behavior didn't cause me to I guess, place Russia above Ukraine in terms of their status with this country. They're still an enemy. And so is China. And what really disturbs, you've seen this, Rhino, is they and China and Iran are starting to get pretty cozy. That's a problem for this country from a national security perspective. You also saw that our Department of Defense has just recently stood down our cyber attacks on Russia. So, while we're sleeping, and honestly 24 hours a day, I guess many people probably aren't aware, we're trading cyber attacks back and forth. Now, fortunately, we have fantastic, very sophisticated, very robust and powerful cyber defenses. But it's gazillions of attacks, cyber attacks, that emanate from Russia into this country. By the way, for decades. This is nothing new. Since the idea of cyber attacks, and we've had global internet have even been available that connects the entire world. There's
not much evidence of it occurring in the 80s, although there were suspicions, but there's evidence of it occurring as early as the mid-90s.
Mid-90s, which is what gave rise to all the various cybersecurity technologies that all came about. About the same time that the bad guys figured out, there's a way we could actually use this internet thing, since we're all digitally connected, to penetrate those systems and do bad stuff. And that mostly comes from Russia. And it's, I think...
Pre-2014, it mostly came from Ukraine.
That's right.
Russians in Ukraine, but the majority of it came from Ukraine.
Yeah, I think I mentioned before on the air, I actually competed to acquire a cybersecurity company based in Ukraine, had about 100 highly qualified technical engineering and architectural staff, and that was their business. Their line of business was pure cybersecurity. And what I learned as part of that process, Rhino, is all these really smart people educated in cybersecurity in Ukraine that got sucked up by the Russian mafia and the Russian government, which are in cahoots, almost one and the same, honestly. It truly is fascism, if you think about it. And they decided they wanted to wear white hats, as we refer to it in the security world, and they formed this company that changed their posture completely, and they got into the business of defending against Russian mafia attacks. Who would know better than that than an insider that worked for them? I lost the deal, by the way. I got outbid. But that was fascinating, learning about that. But you're right. The point is, it's Ukraine. That's where all the smart guys in cybersecurity came from. And I have actually thought to some extent that's one of the things that Russia sought was that talent, so they could force them into work to go launch cyber attacks on this country in the West. We're coming right back in the Element Wealth studio.
This program
Gerard Gibert.
Here we go. This is huge news. Huge news. You need to listen to this.
Middays with Gerard. SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Just as I thought it was going all right, I found out I'm wrong when I thought it was right. It's always the same, it's just a shame, that's all. I could say day and you'd say night. Tell me it's black when I know that it's white. Always the same, it's just a shame, and that's all. I could leave, but I won't go, though my heart might tell me so.
We're back with you in the Element Well studio. Chris from Oxford said, Gerard, that's BS, putting tariffs on electricity. People in Minnesota have any other choice? Trump is only putting tariffs on goods nobody has purchased yet. I'll have to think about it, but I don't think that's right. Well, I guess the first thing I would say to you, Chris, is when it comes to tariffs, help me understand what you think's right and fair. It's the nature of them is to try to instill and induce certain behavior. That's the whole idea. So what both sides are looking for is some sort of leverage in that respect. It's not really a matter of, is it fair? Hey, wait, we're just putting tariffs on this and you're putting tariffs on that. I think both sides are saying we're going to put tariffs on whatever you send into our country. We don't care what it is. In the case of China, for example, Chris, the tariffs are across the board. It's everything that comes out of China, even if it's stuff that we currently can only purchase out of China, only comes from China. So I'm not trying to be argumentative with you. I'm just trying to really explain how kind of the nature of tariffs work. You're trying to induce certain behavior. And I got to tell you, I never even knew anything about electricity and the northern part of our country coming from Ontario. I never even heard of that before. Were you aware of that, Rhino, that we had American households that were importing, essentially being powered by electricity produced in Canada?
I mean, I didn't know per se, but it doesn't surprise me, no.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't either to me. I just never really thought about that. So now, get this. In response to President Trump's tariffs imposed on Canadian imports, the Canadian Premier threatens to cut off electricity. I mean, this is crazy. Says they need to feel the pain. Man. This just came out, by the way, while we were on the program. And this is in response to the tariffs. So I would just say and frame this as this is an economic war, if you will. And both sides are just trying to get the other to react, to bend, to capitulate in some way. And this is what they're doing. So, again, I hope this is just short-lived, that this doesn't last, because I just don't see anything but pain being imposed on both sides, and we'll see if this produces the desired effect. And I know from the president's perspective, it's to level the playing field where he believes it's not, and that generally does apply to similar products we buy from them that in the same category of products that they buy from us. The wine example I used earlier that occurred during the president's first term. So it's just amazing to see all this playing out. Really is. But I hear you. He says, yeah, I think I get it. This is Chris. I think that's crazy that we're having to buy electricity and not producing ourselves. They've got the upper hand. But so Chris, here's the issue. I hear you as well. And I don't know all the details, but I'll bet you, Rhino, this has to do with their proximity to that area of the country, the proximity to resources, such as water, for example, for hydro. I don't know that for sure. I'm guessing here, but I suspect because we've generally had free and amicable trade between our countries that nobody really thought about the fact that, okay, well, if we consume this electricity from Canada, it's no big deal. Now, I'll tell you who is happy, and that's the timber industry in this country, because the Canadian timber, I think 30% of the lumber we use in construction comes from Canada, and they have been kind of known for undercutting our pricing, and the tariffs there are thought to level that playing field. That's a big thing to Mississippi, is it not, Rhino, with much of our forestry export? It's used because that, you know how it is. It crosses the border, it gets tariffed, comes back over, it gets tariffed. Mike McCormick explained that to us in a way that I really never understood until he came in on the studio and talked about all the stuff that goes back and forth that just ratchets up in price with each crossing of the border because the respective countries layer on their tariffs. And that makes its way into the final price. He was talking about, as I recall, not just the manufacturing of final finished products of farm implements, but the parts and the components as part of the manufacturing process, back and forth. So all that I hope we can address and we can fix.
Well, one thing to keep in mind about tariffs, in simplest terms, say you're buying pens, ballpoint pens with your name on them from China, and all of a sudden there's a tariff put on those pens coming from China, an extra thing you've got to pay. As a retailer of these pens, would it be wise to pass on the entirety of the increase in your costs to the consumer in the price?
Right.
It wouldn't make that much sense because you're going to sell fewer pens at a higher price point.
Yeah.
So really, you're stuck with two choices. Either you take a cut in your profit or you renegotiate with your supplier.
Yep.
Really all it comes down to. There's a whole lot of gnashing of teeth about, oh my goodness, what's this going to do and what's that going to do? It's going to require a whole lot of conversations. It's going to require a whole lot of negotiations. And it's going to require countries that are producing stuff outside of the U.S. and shipping it here for us to spend our money on. They're going to have to think twice about overcharging for nonsense.
Agree.
Or else their stuff just won't get sold.
But I think
because we're a bigger part of Canada's economy than they are of ours. We're a bigger part of Mexico's economy than they are of ours. We're a bigger part of China's economy than they are of ours.
We have the leverage there. But I think you would have to acknowledge, though, that there are a number of cases where it's just more cost efficient to produce stuff. I'm talking about American companies. This is why they went overseas. Now, what I said earlier is I think automation is changing that dynamic substantially so that we can, in fact, produce things in this country without the extremely expensive, onerous labor component. That's what drove it. In fact, Rhino, it was American consulting companies that advised many of the fortune companies in this country. Antibiotics is the one that came to mind that we woke up and realized during the pandemic, what the hell? We get all our antibiotics from China? They could literally kill us if somehow that supply chain was disrupted, and we saw that happen a bit. Well, and I did some research on that when that was going on. Like, why in the heck are we making antibiotics in China? And you know what I found at the heart of that? McKinsey was advising, and they serve as big-time consultants to Fortune America. They're a prominent, major consulting firm. But I will say this. I subscribe to their newsletters. I have for years. They're really good in writing about technology and information technology. They kind of lean left. And they advised American companies, you know what? You could outsource this manufacturing piece to China and save a whole bunch of money. And I think that was the case back then. And so the decision was in the boardroom, okay, did we make the stuff in the U.S., the cost is X? Or do we make the stuff in China, the cost is half X? And you see what the decision produced. But again, I maintain that, man, the game is changing because we don't need all this labor filling up the factories anymore. It's just not necessary. And so that is driving the costs down because by far the most expensive component of the cost model, labor, always has been, always will. And so this is good news. That's the point. This is good news. So the president's plan to induce those companies to come back over here, and they look at it, because, you know, they're doing major economic modeling on that before they pull the trigger on a multi-gazillion-dollar plant, and they're saying, yeah, we can automate that thing now. And this is kind of, I would say, accelerating that time frame. That's a kind of a good outcome of the tariffs. It's just painful in the meantime. And electricity may be an example of that. Maybe we'll wake up and say, well, dang, rather than relying on the volatility of another country to supply electricity to this region of the U.S., maybe we ought to think about doing that here. Now, let's be honest, you don't build electrical power plants overnight. It takes a little while. So, yeah, Jason in Pearl says tariff on the export of electricity. Yeah, I mean, again, I'll just point out Canada's going to behave however they see fit to retaliate. And they're causing pain just like we are for them. That's a trade war. We're coming right back with the final segment.
We've sent that rib band.
Gerard Gibert. Going beyond the headlines, breaking down the stories that matter to Mississippi. Middays with Gerard on SuperTalk Mississippi.
We're back with the final segment. Thanks so much for joining us. Lance says, please tell Gerard that if he plays golf today, he probably could hit one over 500 yards. Lance, you won't find me on the golf course today. I don't think I could stand up over the ball. I've had that problem before where you're just trying to keep your balance as the wind is about to knock you down. It's really something. Yeah, a lot of folks are chiming in about this tariff on electricity. I'm not saying it's good. I'm just saying that if you're looking for fairness, you won't find it when it comes to these tariffs, guys. This is a trade war.
And what do they say about love and war? All's fair in love and war.
Yep, and that's what this is. So just as we think that's insane, and I agree, I promise you Canadian citizens are sitting in the country to the north of us thinking that Mr. Trump's tariffs are unfair. What's fair? Define that. This is what the goal is. This is why you have wars, honestly. In this case, it's an economic war. No bloodshed going on, thank God. But it is both sides' strategy approach to cause the other to capitulate, to cede some territory somewhere.
The problem is, for longer than I've been alive, it seems like America has been willingly bending over backwards and giving deference to just about anybody that showed up to the negotiating table.
It's so true.
At the expense of everyday average Americans and their tax dollars.
Yep.
Because the rich people in D.C., with their overflowing bank accounts and tons of privilege they love to preach about, they won't be impacted by any of this. They never are.
Exactly. By the way, a 2025 taxpayer survey conducted by Wallet Hub. You know, it's that time of year. It's the most unwonderful time of the year, getting ready for your taxes. 91% of Americans think that filing taxes should be free. 7 in 10 are worried about inflation more so than taxes. Nearly 1 in 3 people would rather do jury duty than their taxes. 77%. This is the one that really just bugs me, and you know where I'm going. 77% of people believe that the rich don't pay their fair share in taxes. Well, guys, that's more than just Democrats, and I've seen that in polls as well. There are a lot of people on the right that think, yeah, those rich people need to pay more, without understanding whatsoever the true data. The true data. They're already, you're going to hear this, I promise you, after the speech tonight, when you know the president is going to talk about how critical it is to extend his tax policies. You know the response you're going to get from the Democrats is how the rich are stealing from the less fortunate and how they don't pay their fair share. And they pay this is my favorite lie of all time. They pay a lower effective tax rate without telling you that you're including unrealized gains in that calculation. That's not how the tax laws work. Thank God. You don't have to pay taxes in this country on gains until you actually produce a recordable profit and have some cash to show for that gain. They want you to pay it even though you don't. We dodged a bullet on that with Kamala Harris because she bought into that crap and she don't even know what the hell it is. I mean, she doesn't even understand what the difference between a realized and an unrealized gain is. Guarantee you.
In fairness, the list of things she doesn't understand is much longer than the list of things she does.
Thomas in Greenwood says, Trump cares more about dough pads than working Americans since he's basing the tariffs on protecting them from themselves. I have no idea what you're talking about there, Thomas. Well, Gerard, looks like Canada might have to become our 51st state, says CJ in the Delta.
I keep telling y'all, they don't get statehood. The best they could hope for is a territory. We're not letting them vote.
I agree. Richard from Rankin County, when you stand up to a bully, you may take a shot to the mouth, but generally it works out in the long run. I think the question is, Richard, who's the bully here? And that's what's bothering me is that I don't see Russia as an ally of this country. I don't care what Zelensky did on Friday. Shame on him. Man, we've castigated him for that and his behavior, and especially he's essentially reneging on a deal. He was there to sign a deal that he said he was going to sign. What are you laughing about?
So you're saying the enemy of my enemy is still my enemy.
Exactly right. I don't trust either of them. How could you? And I don't want this country cozying up to Putin any more than I want us cozying up to Ukraine. I think we've got to look at it objectively. But I will say this. I don't think Ukraine has its sights set on overtaking this country and defeating this country. Russia does. China does. Ain't no doubt. And they don't care what they have to do to achieve that end. Hey, gee, think about the Upper Peninsula in Michigan. There's not another way to connect to the grid. I've even heard that there's kids who have crossed into Canada to cross back into the USA for school. Only other way was across water. Brian and Madison. Yeah, thanks, Brian. That's what we were saying. I know it sounds kind of weird. I thought it was weird, but I figured it had something to do with the geographic configuration of the area. It just made more sense to do that. And you normally wouldn't think you'd have to worry about it, but now we do. We are out of here today. We'll be back with you again tomorrow. Until then, stay safe and God bless. Just found out AOC's not going tonight. Oh, boy.
A SuperTalk Mississippi media production.